I know that we have a day-long conference tomorrow, but as we always do, as a part of our university, we also, we ensure that we discuss even further. So therefore, we have taken this opportunity to talk and discuss about a very interesting sort of aspect, which of course is going rounds, in other parts of the world, but in India, it's still sort of, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, at a very nascent stage. This evening, we have, a wide range of speakers, and not necessarily they are all lawyers, so that's okay. Um, and, sort of, so therefore, let me sort of, you know, let me first start by saying that, of course, you can read my name, but I can still read out my name. My name is Indranath, associated with the Law School of OP Jindal Global University. I'm a faculty in the law school. I'm associated for the last 8 years, and I work in the area of a little bit. I can't say I work, but I like the area of IP, and I work a little bit in that area. And of course, I have my other colleagues who would be introducing themselves, but I would sort of hand over the microphone to my vice dean of the law school to talk a little bit about the university, a little bit about the thematic session, about his perception about the thematic session, and of course, then I'll have a few words before we start our discussion for this evening. Over to Srijit.
Yeah, thank you, Indra. It's truly an honor being here and being a wise dean who's a wise to the dean. I seldom get an opportunity to give the welcome speech. Always I'm the concluding speaker or the vote of thanks giver. So it's truly an honor being here. Uh, Before we get into the introduction to the law school and the introduction to the panelists, from my limited perspective into intellectual property rights, let me try to put the whole panel in perspective. So I would rather view this as that the globalization is at its best when you view it spatio-temporally. That globalization as something that is happening as a time-space phenomena, something that's happening within the consciousness of humanity. That in this scheme of, or in this larger play of spatio-temporality, time and space compete for dominance, whereby theorists have argued that time has won over the space, literally annihilating the space, eating up the space. But geographers still come back with that strong argument that, no, space too matters, geographies matter in this. If not for geographies, urban spaces and cities would not have been sites of mobility. Slums would not have been the otherness. Geographical indications would not have been a sign of quality. Semi-urban residential clusters would not have popped up in all around the cities. And most important, we would not have witnessed the remote geographies becoming sites of respite and so on and so forth. So there is a strong case for the space in this larger play of time and space. Now, we move into a time when space gains prominence, and then comes the concept of digitalized cities. So as cities become the sites of mobility, cities began to assume a certain hierarchy in this larger politics of contestation for dominance of spaces. Now, metro rails in the city removed the block of mobility. Curves were straightened so that capital moves seamlessly from one part of the city to the other. Communication channels were made so that everything becomes seamless and uninterrupted. And digital cities here become signs of hypermobility. Now, intellectual property laws. Well, if you look at the ontology of intellectual property laws, one can see that change and adaptation is nothing unknown to intellectual property laws. And of course, I've seen that IP theoreticians boast about this unique epistemology of intellectual property rights, that it can adapt to any changes. But here we are witnessing a new dynamics of spatio-temporality. The fundamental question is that, is IP regime prepared enough to meet with this new shifting hyperdynamics of the spatio-temporality? In fact, as I've said, IP regime's inherent adaptability, which its epistemology is so proud of, is tested at the hands of this speeding time-space dynamics. Questions arising out of such and similar considerations, I'm sure, will be the subject matter of today's panel discussions, harnessing the potential of 5G technologies for shared prosperity. For the panel today, we have distinguished speakers. Let me introduce them, not essentially in any hierarchical order. In the way it is put in the brochure, Professor Alka Chawla, Associate Professor, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Dr. Mahesh Utpal, Director, Comforst, India. Professor Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, Professor, Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. Mr. Eric Stasik, Founder Director, Avika AB. Professor Chitresh Kumar, Assistant Professor and Deputy Controller of Examinations, Jindal Global Business School and OP Jindal Global University. Mr. Padam Vijay Vergia, Technical Advisor, Smart Cities Mission, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And Mr. Neil Kumar, Managing Director, Anstel Private Limited, Australia. So I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to all the distinguished panelists. And I truly feel that I got this opportunity to welcome everybody, and let me here say a few words about the school. Jindal Global Law School is deeply committed to offer instruction in intellectual property rights. Every semester, we offer 80 elective courses, of which 10% of them, we ensure that are on intellectual property rights. JIRICO has been one of the pride of Jindal Global Law School, and that pride continues, and you can see that how much we cherish that, the institution and also its activities. But most reassuring of all this is that in this melting pot of change, we look at technology as a means of human excellence. Humanity stays live. Thank you very much, and I welcome you all to this wonderful panel which we are going to have.
Thank you very much, Srijit. It was great, listening to you. Before I sort of, ask you, we start with the opening remarks. Maybe I'll just quickly talk a little bit about JIRICO and the kind of work that we do. In 2015, we started with a research think tank looking at evidence-driven policy making. And it's been like close to 4 years now, and we have at least amongst us the 5 faculty colleagues. To my left, Ashish Bharadwaj, Professor Arshid Bharadwaj, Professor Vishwas Devaiya, Professor Manveen Singh, and Professor Aviru Bose. And we sort of are working towards something interesting, I would say, at least. And as a list of publications, you probably have seen that few sort of, books sort of hanging around the place. The one over there, as you can, if I may point, is a book that we are working on. There's a most recent book. It's kind of a textbook for not only students but practitioners. It's probably would be the first book in India at the interface of IP and competition. And in the past, we have had the chance to author and edit a couple of interesting books. The first one was released in 2017, and the one after that in 2018. The one released in 2017 has been downloaded reasonably, and the one after that, we are happy to sort of say, or I'm happy to say that it's been downloaded close to 71,000 times over a span of just about 11 months. So both been published by, or the third book has also been published by Springer. So I'm sort of say thank you to the senior editor, and she's somewhere around, Nupur. Thank you very much for your help and support, and to the Springer team. So JIRICO is sort of working, and we have had the pleasure of welcoming some of you in our conferences and to our panel discussions before. And we welcome all our guests for this evening, and thank you again for being a part of this endeavor. So the idea of the panel discussion, for this evening is to give you the opportunity to talk about your area and the kind of work that you do in the context of the topic that we are going to discuss today, this evening. And of course, once you sort of please limit your opening remarks to about 3 to 4 minutes, so that we can sort of have some free-flowing discussion. We have few pointers with you, or on that TV screen. Of course, it's not limited. That was, we could thought about those issues, but since you are the experts, you would have far many issues to discuss. So we can have we can just sort of shift it to the other side. Maybe we can have this screen shifted to the right, please. So if we may sort of start with maybe Professor Professor Chawla, with your opening remarks, and maybe for about 3 to 4 minutes, and then we move forward to Dr. Upal, Professor Mukherjee, Eric, and to Professor Chitresh and Mr. Padam Vijay, and then to Neil Kumar. Yes, ma'am, over to you.
And thanks to JIRICO for calling me. I'll restrict myself to 3-4 minutes, but I would not talk about any of the points of discussion here. The reason being, I thought with 1G we started with mobile telephony and it went on with smartphones basically. But when we come to 5G, it is not simply the patenting issues which are present. We also have a lot of copyright issues and trademark issues which are also going to open up. Because as we know that 3G started the internet, 4G came the speed, and 5G is coming with more with connectivity. And when we talk about connectivity of information, Internet of Things, connectivity which is present, and there's a fast-flowing connectivity which is there, I personally feel it is the entertainment industry which is going to be affected the most. And though this is going to help the health sector, that everybody is talking about the health sector, and just now even Arpita was talking about it, but I think even the entertainment industry is going to be affected. Piracy is already an issue, and piracy will become a bigger issue. So how is the Copyright Act going to deal with it? We already have, as far as this is concerned, FRAND and the licensing policies, we have a lot of cases of Ericsson going on, and some of them have also been decided. So whether we need to stick to the royalty issues basically, whether we should look at the royalty from the perspective of the final product which is present, or whether royalty which has to be related to the smallest saleable commodity which is to be there. These are, I think, which are issues which are still going to take up. So as the discussion goes, probably I can pitch in. Thank you so much. But I would like even to add the copyright there.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Chawla. Dr. Upal.
Thank you, Professor Gupta and all your colleagues, and lovely to be here. And JIRICO, as we all have said, is a monument to excellence. It's really amazing the kind of work you've done. But let me come to what you've asked me to do. I too am not going to deal with most of these issues directly. And where I'm coming from, and as you know, and as will be obvious from what I speak, I'm not a lawyer, okay? So I come from a regulatory background and have been involved in this sector for quite a while, especially in wireless regulation and stuff, of which, of course, 5G poses major issues. As Professor Chawla mentioned, 5G is a new beast. It's not a logical extension of 2G, 3G, 4G. It's a new beast in town, if you like. And of course, it's worth reminding ourselves that 5G, what are the chief features of 5G? It provides you hitherto unavailable bandwidth. It not only provides you high bandwidth, it also provides you very low latency. And it also, of course, is going to have huge implications for the IoT, the Internet of Things. Now, as Dr. Chawla also mentioned, entertainment clearly is one area where the impact will be significant, but obviously health and a whole lot of other areas are bound to be impacted. But where I come from, I think, and particularly from the Indian perspective, I do believe that regulators will determine whether or not 5G actually works out the way it's going to, it needs to. And the reason I mention this is because even today, regulators are key to whether we will have the appropriate spectrum, which is absolutely critical. They're critical to rights of way, because eventually if you want to put infrastructure up, you will need rights of way to actually to install the various antennae, the various bits of infrastructure. And they are, of course, critical to both privacy and security issues. So, I mean, how well or how badly the regulators handle this will determine how 5G does. And this I say so with some level of responsibility, because I think some of the issues that we are facing in India give us some causes for concern. And certainly our issues relating to spectrum are still largely unresolved. And the key part of spectrum that we will need, which is the 26 to 28 gigahertz spectrum, is still nowhere near being resolved as to what the plans are. Indeed, the 5G spectrum auctions for what is called the 3.5 gigahertz band are due, but none of the industry players seem to be overly keen. And of course, we still don't know how things will work out, but again, there seems to be an attempt to actually maximize revenues from that that auction that is going to be held. And given the state of 5G and its deployment, given the fact that there is a major issue about business cases, there is, there is still a lot of work to be done with usage scenarios and stuff like that. This might probably be a very, very problematic time to hold this auction in the format in which it is being conceived. So that might be one issue that I thought I would flag. The other issue that I thought I'd flag in my 2-3 minutes is the whole issue of how we need a very, very significantly different approach to licensing. As you're aware, India's virtually any kind of deployment of infrastructure requires a license. Any kind of a service, telecom service that you provide requires a license. Now, what makes 5G a bigger issue is the fact that 5G, as we mentioned before, is not a logical extension of 4G or whatever. And we are going to see its deployment in a very different way from the way we are used to. For example, there will be niche areas, whether it is niche services, niche regions, niche target audiences, etc. Now, if your licensing regime is not sufficiently nuanced, then you have major challenges because, for instance, today, if I want to provide services, let us say in Gurgaon, or let's not even say Gurgaon, let's say Kanpur, I must actually take a license for the whole state of Uttar Pradesh. If I want to provide services only in Bangalore, I must actually get a license for Karnataka. Now, and each one of those licenses comes at fairly high initial costs, plus very onerous conditions when it comes to sharing revenues, etc. So to me, what the licensing regime is deficient in is the flexibility that 5G will in particular require. We will need to have a regime which is attractive to investors who will want to invest in specific areas, specific services, etc. Unfortunately, in my humble opinion, we are not yet there in terms of our licensing. So I think, one, if we deal with the spectrum issues, two, if we deal with fine-tuning our licensing regime, in fact, doing away with a large part of it, which has actually now become a bit of an anomaly. As you're probably aware, most mature regulatory regimes have almost abandoned this kind of licensing other than, for specific use of spectrum, etc. So unless we are able to do that in a reasonably short period of time, we will have, and in a way that attracts investment, encourages innovation, we do have some question marks to deal with when it comes to 5G. So maybe I'll stop here and we can take it further.
Professor Mukherjee.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. I am not a lawyer. So I would I would take it. I work with a research organization called ICRIAR, and we look into most of this policy issue from an international angle. What comes to us as a policy issue is largely from what is happening in the G20 or in the WTO, and there is a lot of debate around data localization, R&D and research on 5G, and how to you have, well, how it's basically a institution, technology versus abilities of the government and regulation to control technology. And it's not like India is facing that. Developed countries are also struggling with that. You see Chinese cases in the US and other countries. So, you know, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is a research, what is a data. But in India, if you talk to Indian companies and their 5G adaptation and whether they can move forward, even before they talk about their legal issues and others, they will come back and say, I don't have my R&D, I don't have my money to do and my R&D, it is a 4G plus, I don't have an infrastructure, and you can face it on your day-to-day phone calls. You cannot make a phone call rightly. So what they need is a kind of a comprehensive support. And when you are coming to this 5G, which is spanning across multiple organizations, because we are talking about, you know, Aadhaar link data, bank link data, health link data. So when you are talking about multiple agencies, something which was under the domain of the telecom regulator and the telecom department, and suddenly became a domain of everybody else. And that is where I think there is a policy confusion within India, because today it is Niti Aayog is coming out with a policy, Ministry of Commerce is writing an AI paper, and somehow when they write these papers, they don't talk to each other. Okay, so therefore there is nothing which you can come out as an Indian government view. And we do not have view on very specific topics which we have to take this forward. For example, are we ready to share a data with a trust internationally? We don't have a view, we don't know, and there are huge problems. So one is that they have to come out with a uniformity, as a nodal institution, who will handle, how it will be handled, because even if your spectrum and everything is given by one ministry, the other ministry can be a big blockade in the whole process of development of this. Now coming to the whole question of copyright and other things, you know, Indian patents are low. If you do your research here, you can set up 5G centers and so have set up in IIT and others. You are working a lot with algorithms and software. You are working less with hardware. You will have to go somewhere and do your patent, because that is, if that is copyright and not patented and you are not finding some way out, you just see where China is and where US is and where we are. So it will finally become a technology war. And in the technology war between US and China, we are a bit confused about whom should we tag along with. And at the moment we are mostly tagging along with China in terms of the policy. But China has kept a closed door, allowed its company to grow, and next year China will open up because it is doing over. Now then where do we stand? So all of that will come, and then you come to other things like, you know, you have big companies in India which are talking about smart cities, smart home, etc. And we really don't know where we are going. Because if we are coming back to all this protection, security, ownership and everything, and if you, in a data protection world, if you say localization means being on soil data or something like that, how am I going to ensure that my data is protected in Amazon server located in India vis-a-vis Geo server located in India vis-a-vis a government owned server? So all of these are, you know, in a democracy, to implement a dictatorial policy of China can also be somewhat difficult, because as you have seen in Aadhaar case, somebody went to the court and said, I don't want to go for it. So this is something that we are grappling out from the point of view of economists and law. But what I would like to tell you is there is no data, there is no information, and at the moment when we talk to companies, they are just thinking 4G plus. None of them have really thought about anything remotely which is 5G.
Hi, I'm Eric Stasek. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here. Is it switched on? You have to move it closer to me. Those were very interesting comments. I'm a licensing guy. These are the things that are in my head all the time, and then you. That's just for you, Eric. And then you remind me that there's Thank you, but you remind me that there's an entire other aspect of this that I haven't even taken into consideration that just further complicates things. I agree with Dr. Uppal that to some extent that 5G is not a new beast, it's a beast. If we look at 2G and 3G, 4G, they were just tame little kittens compared to what 5G is going to be. And everything we've learned from 2G, 3G, and 4G, I think is going to be of very little value when we come into some of the 5G applications. 2G, 3G, 4G, I tend to think them in terms of personal communication, connecting people, Nokia's slogan they had so many years. And largely that's what 2G, 3G, and 4G have done. 5G is connecting businesses. It's creating ecosystems, smart cities, smart homes, these slogans that we talk about that nobody really knows what they mean, but they mean something much more than what we ever saw in 2G, 3G, or 4G. And I think that as I said, from a licensing perspective, the licensing problems we had in 2G, 3G, and 4G are going to be very small compared to the challenges that face us in 5G. We have new applications, new companies, new business models. There are things, as you mentioned, with low latency. I'm really excited about that. That's going to open up things I can't even imagine right now. And as a licensing guy, I sit and think, how the heck are we going to manage that? The models that we have absolutely don't fit. We're going to have to come up with something completely new. So I think that's my takeaway for this, that 5G is going to require an innovation in our thinking as well as innovations in technology.
Yeah, hi. So I actually come from the smart city implementation area. So I have certain experience, some amount of experience working in the project monitoring unit of smart cities. So my concern or whatever research I have done mostly will come from the idea of whether how you are going to implement it, or mostly the India specific challenges perspective. So while doing my research, I was actually today morning I was reading an article in New York Times, which is basically a proposed sponsored article by Qualcomm. It says that right now the problem is that most of us are talking about what 5G can do or will do, but no one has the idea what actually it will do. So everyone is talking about that it can do this or that, and no one is coming down to the actual platform that if we talk about across geographies, what it actually will be able to do. Now, from my limited understanding, I think if you're talking about 5G and the shared prosperity, we are mostly talking about comprehensive connectedness. Now, in Indian context, if we just break it down, it's going to be like, if you just talk about e-governance, it's going to be government to business, government to citizen, or government to government to the actual government. Basically, if we come from the technological perspective, which we are talking about, is we are saying that, okay, 4G was where we talked about connected devices. Now we are talking about connected systems. Or in a different way, we can say that right now what the government approach in ICT is mostly that they are talking about ICT-enabled citizens, whereas 5G will bring you to the platform of ICT-enabled systems. Now the problem with all of this is that no one knows the scale of solution it can provide. The reason being is that there is no benchmark. If we say that it's a new beast or a beast altogether, and there is no comparable benchmark from 2G, 3G, or 4G, you can't say what it can do and what it can't do. Now, so in order to check that what it can do, I actually tried to analyze it from, at least from a data perspective, how much information flow. A lot of it is related to how much information can be shared and how fast it can be shared. So if we go by the figures, 5G, you can download somewhere in the range of 789 megabytes per second. That's a Qualcomm figure. You can upload something which is approximately 150 or 143 Mbps. If we compare this with 4G, it comes to the 4G global average is 17 Mbps, and then Indian average is 6 Mbps. So if I divide this 1/3 averaging system in Indian context, I'm talking about 50 Mbps download upload speed. Now why I'm talking about this from the implementation perspective is that the moment you bring it down to a 5G with a 50 Mbps uploading speed, we are removing a lot of things which the shared prosperity is all about. Basically, we are now bringing or taking out the auto-driven vehicles, because then you need the latency is going to go away. You're talking about anything which is related to real-time image resolution-based analysis or anything per se will go away. Now, what's the problem with this thing going away? I will come from the SEP perspective, is that if there are few firms which are actually good at doing it, Qualcomm being one of those, Intel might be adding the hardware part of it, and from the Chinese perspective is Huawei. Now the problem with all of this is that if you're not able to achieve the speeds, okay, you don't have a lot of options to go to. So your patent and your business model might not be conducive to find different companies. Why am I saying that is that if you talk about SEPs, a lot of SEPs are either with Qualcomm or either with Huawei. Now I checked that what happens to the communication. As of now, we will go with the first approach should be to go with the telecommunication providers. Now out of the top 50 communication provider companies in this world, 45 are using some sort of SEPs with Huawei. So if Huawei will not be able to provide something within the Indian context, basically more or less Qualcomm will not be able to provide it. So when we are talking about most of these things, my only concern is that, as we say in our infrastructure implementation thing, that infrastructure development for the shared prosperity is a lot of times all about digging once or climbing once. If you're not able to dig it in one go, then you're basically creating a mess. Okay? If you're not able to climb in one go, you're creating a mess. So these are the concerns I will like the panel to actually discuss, that, okay, it's good in terms of having patents and business models and everything, but what it actually can do for us and how to actually implement that.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me in such a good August gathering. I'm probably the only man odd out here. I come from the technology background. I'm part of the Smart Cities handholding team based out of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Smart Cities Mission. I would probably connect dots. What we have been discussing, we are moving from shared prosperity to the whether we should have 5G or not, whether we should have what kind of legal or patent framework that we should have. Are we ready today? Are we not? Do we really be careful about the patent and the licensing at this point of time or not? Whether we would have 5G auctions or not? All these, I think, questions are all in our head. But let me take a step back and give a perspective of Smart Cities Mission. We have all been talking about smart cities. Let me tell you, 5G will be given to us. We might not take it, but it will be given to us. It will be given to us in the same manner as 4G was given to us. We never took 4G. We never had a requirement of the high speed, because our business was running. Our business was always running. The need was created by many means, and we are all aware of that means, because the business has to run for many organizations. That's the way the 4G came and given. We were probably not ready for 4G at that point of time. We might be ready today because our expectations have been set differently. Now, coming from the Smart Cities Mission, smart cities, everybody look up to us and say that, what smart are you doing? Every now and then I face this question that, what do you mean by smart city? And every day the definition changes. For us, the smart cities means if you open a tap, water should come. I think that is a smartness. If you light a switch, it should give enough light for you to really do your day-to-day work. If you need a food, the food should be available to you. I think that is the way smart cities are defined, and every city has a different way of looking at smartness. The larger cities like metro would have a different expectation. They may not have a problem of water, or maybe to an extent, or electricity, but they would like to see, can they be a more internet savvy? Probably that is where this 5G or the larger technology infusion will gain momentum. Arpita ma'am talked about very important aspect, that the technology, whether it is AI or AI for all, this is not contextualized to Indian environment. It is more of a given by the foreign organization. Then you are asked to adopt it in the same manner with some tweaking. I think that this is the area that we have to be very careful about, not related to technology, but also about the patent and regulatory aspects. Because in India, I think we are using technology for convenience, or by convenience rather, and not by going through a methodology. We should ensure that we cover all bases. I think that is where we are lacking in big time, and enough institutional framework and governance needs to be put in place to adopt the new technology or new process in place in Indian environment. I think we are big time losing on that, and we are only addressing it as when it comes to us, rather than being proactively ready for this. Now Niti Aayog came out with a paper called AI for All, and it has been taking circles across the corridors of the ministry. Not that it will not fly, it will definitely fly. It will fly with a lot of consultation, but at the end of the day, what will happen is that, is India ready for AI today? Or it is only a technology infusion that will come in for next 5 years and then will become AI ready? Probably that is the time we might require 5G. We are talking about remote surgery on 5G. Sorry for being little away from the subject, but I think we are talking about 5G for shared prosperity. If I really look at the genuine case of 5G, it has to be a remote surgery. It has to be an industrial revolution. It has to be automation. It has to be an AI. But do we really require this at this point of time? I think that's a big question that we all have in mind. And by the time 5G comes in, I think we will start building up the use cases around this and see that whether remote surgery can be useful in Indian context. How much we'll be able to adopt. But adopting the remote surgery is easy, but can you bring in the economy of scale by doing that? Or whether it will be very costly for all of us? I think that question also we have to ask ourselves. I'll stop here and really be part of the discussion again and bring another perspective. But I would also request that if there are any specific questions that you have with respect to the smart cities, I would be also keen to answer those questions, because one of the things that we are very keenly focusing as we are moving forward in the smart city, next 2.0 or whatever .0 that you call it, we are focusing on two important aspects, and those are all related to point number 3 and point number 5. One, democratization of data. 2, making all the projects in the smart cities driven by the performance and not by the inputs. What I essentially mean is, all the projects so far in the in smart city have been infrastructure driven. So you put an investment of 100 crore, you build infrastructure, you don't know where you're going. As we are moving in the next wave of smart cities or urban transformation, that we may call it, it is going to be an outcome driven, output driven, performance driven. I think that is a change that we are looking at. That is where the technology is like 6th number. It might start coming in, feeling the kind of existence. 5G will become relevant there. So it will be driven by this thought of bringing an outcome, doing more with less. There's a logo, the tagline that we have in smart cities called doing more with less. I think that is where it will come in. Point number 3 is extremely important, because when we are saying democratization of data or building the data culture in the smart cities, data privacy is going to be definitely important, and this is where we have to have a very important discrimination or distinction between the two words. One is custodian of a data and owner of a data. I think this has to be there's already a thin line. We feel that it is our data, but you're actually a custodian of data, you're not the owner of the data. So that distinction has to come in when you build regulation and the policy framework or the IPR framework around data. I'll stop here, and maybe the next speaker can take it over from here. Thank you so much.
So good evening, everyone. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. I would like to start where Param ended. Now, we are actually hands-on with IoT, so we have implemented IoT in multiple countries. Now, I would like to give you some insights of how it's going to make a difference in the society altogether. Now, if you ask your kids now, don't touch the mobile phone, they'll look at you. They say, are you kidding? So as you said, rightly said, that 5G will be given to you. You have no choice. So we are already into a shared economy, and you cannot deny the fact. Take an example of Uber. The next generation, they are not going to buy a car. They're going to share a car. You take an example of Airbnb. What do? You have a property, you have some space left, you want to rent it out. You look at things like online general practitioner, like a GP. You provide the information, they look at you, there's a set of doctors sitting on the other side of the app. They are basically telling you what's happening with your health. So you cannot deny the fact that you're not going to share the data. You are sharing data, and you will share more and more data. So what's happening with 5G? We, as Mahesh has rightly pointed out, that it's about low latency. It's bringing in more speed. And it's simultaneous devices talking to the network. That's the very reason we need 5G. Now, if I come to Arpita today and say, Arpita, do you need 5G? You say, look, I'm very happy with what I have. I can browse the internet, I can watch movies, I can stream. Why would I need 5G? But the whole purpose of 5G is more, as Eric pointed out, it's more for business, for IoT to come in. So what we are seeing in the market is the stage is all set. And we, based in Sydney, we also have an office in Delhi in Gurgaon. What we're seeing is the stage is all set. 5G has been rolled out. Telstra has rolled out 5G. They've spent around $8 billion, and Ericsson obviously is a partner. They're doing 120 sites in Australia. They're going to reach out to around 25 major cities and towns. And as you can imagine, Australia is a huge country. It's quite well spread. Now, from an Australian perspective, getting data from each and every corner was always a dream. But when 5G comes in, it becomes a reality. And we are quite happy with that. So what's happening in this scenario is, once this stage is set, there are startups, there are disruptors coming with new, different ideas. So you can imagine, these are small companies. They don't have the deep pocket to go to a lawyer and have a 50-page of document drafted, or a legal document drafted. So where I'm coming from is, how would you stop it? You cannot stop them. So there has to be some sort of licensing standardization. So if you look at licensing today, we have got usage-based license, you have got sole license, you have got exclusive license, you have got non-exclusive license. And most importantly, which is very common with big players, is white labeling. They want to white label. So if I go and talk to Airtel, they said, can you white label it? I said, yes, why not? So being a startup or a small company, there are so many out there. So if you go to cities like San Francisco or in mainland Europe, you'll find many of them. So in Australia, once this has been rolled out, 5G has been rolled out, what we are seeing is there is a new complexity coming up. And what we figured out, and not figured out, but I looked into the internet, and we found that in average, $1.9 million of data breach loss happens in average per organization. Now imagine when 5G comes in, it will triple. So that's a big loss. This is not intangible loss. If you look at the intangible loss, just because of data privacy, I lose my customer because of my reputation. So me as a small, medium, or large enterprise, how do I control it? That's one example. The second example I want to throw here is when we go and provide, let's take an example. We go to L&T. we provide a solution, or we go to Padam and provide a solution. Now, we are extracting data from his smart city. Once we have extracted data from the smart city, we are sharing with Google. We are sharing with a lot of AI companies. We are sharing with a hell lot of companies out there. Now, am I at risk? Because I am using, in technical terms, they call it API. I'm using the API to get information on AI because I'm not an AI provider. So how am I safe? How is he safe? And how are they safe? And with the licensing thing coming in, and if there's a data breach, how does he come and say, Neil, I'm going to sue you now? And when I look back, there's no one. Like, so there's no back-to-back. How many back-to-back licenses agreement do I do? So I want to keep it short, and the final thing, obviously, press is not here. I'm happy with that. So the final thing is, as you know, with Australia, with UK, and with US as well, they are putting a huge restriction on Huawei as a company. So how we are working is, we are working with chipset, like you have heard of U-blocks. Those type of chipsets we are using, which are approved by local providers like Telstra or big companies. So we are safe as a small and medium enterprises. We are quite safe. Padam is happy because he knows the chipset we are providing is authorized, no one sniffing in it, right? Which I think Australian government in whole has taken a very good step in that, where we cannot, because you're not only laying out a network, you're also putting companies like us in a big risk. Because if Padam comes to me saying, Neil, what have you done? I don't have anyone to look back, but now I have got Telstra at the back. 5G also brings in some other issues, which obviously are not part of this conversation, is health issues, occupational health and safety issues. Because with 5G, the number of nodes are increasing. So there is a huge health implications, which is debatable, and I'm not an expert on that. This is what I heard from Ericsson as well, and Telstra as well, but it's not been proven yet. So the point I'm trying to make is, and how we work as a IoT provider, we make sure that we follow standards. And as Padam says, we keep Australian data in Australia, and we keep Indian data in India. We don't try to exchange things. And data breach is very important. Sorry, I'm a bit going over the time. Just the last thing is, with Indian perspective, we are seeing is they need awareness. The Indian small and medium businesses are not aware of data privacy. They say, okay, give me 20% discount. I don't care if you're selling it to someone else. That has to be done by regulators, or there should be awareness program that where is actually your data going. So that's all from my end. Thank you once again, guys.
Thank you, Neil. We'll sort of, although I said 3 minutes, sort of, but that's not a problem. I think we already have a few questions, sort of. But before I sort of open the floor and sort of ask you questions myself, I was sort of listening to the conversation and the discussions that we were having, and I don't think, I may be wrong in my understanding, but there is no sort of clear laid out plan as to what India needs really. Are we when you say that, are we ready for 5G? But what is 5G for our for our citizens, or for Indians for that matter? What are the changes that we want to bring about with 5G? And therefore, we need to sort of break it down, and sort of understand what 5G means for us. Before we talk about the implementation plan, we talk about data, we talk about multiple other issues. I can think of a number of papers that are sort of going around in the European Union and other things, talking about 5G, IoT, AI, so on and so forth, talking about licensing. But I think we need to ask the basic questions, basic question as to whether India is 5G ready, because it seems that there is a slight apprehension as to, and I could sort of listen to at least 2 to 3 speakers, is that 5G would be there. There is no there is no way of avoiding 5G. It'd be given to us. So I would like to sort of know from the panel that what exactly it means that 5G would be given to us, and what kind of changes do we see in foreseeable future, because unless we have those basic understandings, we would not be able to sort of comprehend the other challenges. Of course, this is a sort of a general question that I have for the panel, and also if you have any question for other panelists, please feel free.